Hello everyone and welcome back. Thanks so much for joining me today. As promised, today I'm going to show you how to transfer your line sketch to your pastel paper. I'm actually going to show you two different ways and they're both really easy and very similar. I'm using the printed line sheet of the flower because I wanted to show you that you can still do this even if you can't draw or simply don't want to. And I drew the bird using the grid method that I showed in my last video. And I'll link to that here and at the end of this video. But for the first method, I'm using a product called Saral. It's a wax-free transfer paper available in several colors. Or you can use pan pastels or pastel sticks. Very often I use black, but I don't have the Saral transfer paper in black, so I usually use either my hard black stick by Faber Castell or my black pan pastel. However, since I'm working on the brown pastel mat today, the white will show up just fine. And the white will actually blend really nicely with both of these finished paintings. The only other supplies needed are some low tack tape and either a number 2 pencil or a big pen and a pastel pencil similar to the color of the transfer that you're using. Here I have my Faber Castell Pitt pencil in white. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I'm going to show you the daisy using the transfer paper method. Here you see my guidelines. I measure and mark those with my pastel pencil before I start. I generally cut my pastel paper an inch larger than I want my finished painting, so I have room to tape it down. And that leaves a nice clean edge to make handling and framing easier. Since I'm using the transfer paper method for this one, I don't have to do anything to the line sheet except cut it down. Then I'm just going to line it up roughly with my guidelines. It doesn't have to be perfect, just close. And I'm going to grab my low tack tape. This is an acid-free masking tape, but to be honest, it's going to be on there for such a short period of time that it doesn't really matter. I like to use 3 pieces just to help keep it from shifting. Next, I grab my transfer paper. You can actually tell which side has the pigment on it because it'll actually deposit some of that onto your fingers, just like that. It feels a lot like pastel, to be honest. And I'm just going to lay the transfer paper between my line sheet and my pastel paper, pigment side down. The great thing about these sheets is that you can use them over and over again. You can kind of see where I've used this one many times before. Now you can use either your number 2 pencil or the ballpoint pen. I actually like using the big pen just to make it easier to see where I've been before, but it doesn't really matter that much. And now we're just going to trace along the image. We want to make sure that we're using a pretty light pressure when tracing the image. If you use heavy pressure, it'll groove your paper where you draw, and we don't want that. The grooves create dips that the pastel will have trouble filling when we get to the painting part. And once I've made a couple of lines, I like to lift it up and make sure it's transferring, and I can see that it is. If your lines don't appear dark enough, don't worry about it. That's why we have the pastel pencil out. You're actually better off having your lines be a little on the light side as long as you can see them at least a little bit, than risk going too heavy and grooving your paper. So if you just go online and search for transfer papers, you're likely to come across carbon paper and graphite papers, but I don't recommend them. Carbon transfers a dark permanent line that's difficult to correct or move. And when I tried using graphite transfer paper, it seemed to transfer really light, making me inclined to use a heavier hand. And as I mentioned before, that's not something we want. But even if it happened to be the brand I tried, graphite has a shiny finish just like a regular number 2 pencil, and that could resist the pastel. Now, you can lift off most of the graphite with a putty eraser and it'll probably be fine. But for these reasons, I prefer to use either the wax-free transfer paper like Saral or using actual pastel like I'll be showing you with the bird. And speaking of the bird, on to method number 2. You can use soft or hard pastel sticks or your pan pastels for this. So I'll just flip over the line sketch here and we're going to go ahead and cover the back with pastel. We can either use the soft sticks like this, hopefully your fingers aren't as fumbly as mine, or you can use the pan pastels. Now, the white's really having trouble showing up, so I tried mixing it with a light blue, but it didn't really help much. But hopefully you can imagine what I'm doing. The key here is to coat the entire back. I'm just wiping down my mat so that I don't get all that pastel all over the front. But it's important to rub the pastel into the back with your fingers. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a mess all over your pastel paper. Then I generally repeat the process, especially when I'm using the pan pastels. I find the pan pastels go on a little bit thin. So I'll give it a second coat and once again rub it into the back with my fingers. Look how dirty my fingers get. So I'm going to go ahead and clean those off and we'll be right back to transfer the bird to our pastel paper. So just like I did with the daisy, I'm lining up my sketch with my guidelines that I drew on the pastel paper. It is a 1/2 inch shy on the top because I want this to be 9 by 9 and it's just going to be background, so I didn't see the point of attaching 2 pieces of paper together. But just like I did before, I'm going to go ahead and trace along my guidelines. And once I get a few lines down, I check it just like I did before. Most of this part is pretty similar to how we did the daisy. Now you can trace or transfer as much or as little detail as you prefer. Since this is my actual sketch at this point, I've usually already decided the level of detail I want. That being said, even tracing a printed image like the daisy can help to improve your drawing skills over time, as long as you're making even the smallest effort to learn to draw. I know that not everybody is comfortable with drawing, and that's totally okay to get started. But if you're serious about pursuing something like pastel, I highly recommend learning some basic drawing skills. Sometimes things can happen and you lose half your sketch or something like that. Not to mention, just being able to really see as a basic drawing skill will enhance your finished art immensely. A good tip, and something I do very often, is to have your reference image open the whole time and keep glancing at it as you go along. I even did this with the daisy. And you can see me pausing every here and there to glance at my reference photo with this one. This will help with both improving your eye and making small adjustments as you go. Now, a lot of the time, my transferred image is very light, especially when I'm using the pastel method, which is actually the one I use most often. So I will move the line sketch out of the way, leaving it attached just in case I missed anything. And I'll get my pastel pencil out so that I can show you how I correct this. What I'm going to do is actually go back over any light lines. In this case, it's pretty much the whole sketch, but I'll go back over them with the pastel pencil. Now, I'm still using a very, very light touch. I know it may not look like it, but I really am. I use a really light hand so that it can be easily covered or blended in when I start the actual painting. And as you can see, it shows up just fine. So this step may seem a little redundant, but in addition to making the sketch more visible, I find it really helps me familiarize myself with the form of the image in my mind, which of course helps with the painting process, but it also gives me another opportunity to make any corrections I may see to the sketch as I go along. Having a sharp pastel pencil is especially helpful for details in this stage. I do plan on making another video in the very near future showing how I sharpen mine, as they tend to crumble in a regular pencil sharpener, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. I left the line sketch attached in case I needed to drop it back down just like I did and trace anything I missed. Now for that tiny claw, obviously I very easily could have just eyeballed it, but I wanted to show you why I did that. Having to line it up for something bigger would have been a serious challenge. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you give it a thumbs up and share it, and leave any questions or comments down below. And please subscribe for more videos like this and much more. And of course, don't forget to hit the little bell icon so you know when I share more videos. To follow me on social media, check out the links in the description below, or just search for Sylvia's Art Spot. And once again, thanks so much for watching with me today, and until next time, enjoy creating!